The Apache warriors surrounded the frightened woman, but instead of chains, their leader offered her a choice that would change both of their destinies forever. The wind howled across the endless desert, carrying clouds of red dust over the rocky hills. A broken wagon leaned against a boulder, its wheel shattered beyond repair. The silence that followed the attack was almost unbearable. Elena Dawson stumbled through the dry wilderness, her faded blue dress torn by cactus thorns and sharp branches. Every step sent pain through her aching feet, but stopping meant certain death. She had not eaten in 2 days, and her canteen held only a few precious drops of water. Behind her lay the remains of the wagon train she had once trusted. Bandits had struck without warning, taking everything they could. Those who survived had scattered into the desert, leaving Elena completely alone. As the blazing afternoon sun climbed higher, her vision blurred. She whispered a desperate prayer. "Please, just let me live." A sudden sound froze her in place. Hoofbeats. Not one horse. Several. Her heart pounded wildly. She turned slowly and saw 6 riders emerging from behind a ridge. Their horses moved with incredible speed and confidence. The men wore traditional Apache clothing, bows slung across their backs and rifles resting against their saddles. Fear gripped her chest. She had heard countless stories about Apache warriors since childhood, stories that painted them as ruthless enemies. Whether those tales were true or not, she had no way of knowing. The riders surrounded her without speaking. Elena raised trembling hands. I don't have anything," she whispered. The warriors exchanged quiet glances but made no move toward her. Then another rider appeared. Unlike the others, his horse was a magnificent black stallion. The man's presence commanded immediate respect. His long dark hair rested over his shoulders, and calm, sharp eyes studied the exhausted stranger before him. Without raising his voice, he spoke in English. "Who are you?" The word surprised Elena. My name is Elena Dawson." "What happened?" "Bandits attacked our wagon train." The chief looked toward the distant smoke rising above the hills. He already knew. One of the younger warriors leaned forward. "Chief, she is one of the settlers." The chief remained silent for a long moment. Finally he dismounted. Elena instinctively stepped backward, expecting the worst. Instead, he removed his own water skin and held it out. "Drink." She stared in disbelief. You're helping me? You will die if you do not." Her hands shook as she accepted the water. She drank carefully, tears filling her eyes. The cool water felt like life itself. When she finished, she tried to hand it back. The chief nodded. "What is your name?" she asked quietly. "I am Dakota." One of the warriors looked uncertain. "Chief, should we trust her?" Dakota answered without looking away from Elena. "An unarmed woman is not our enemy." His calm authority ended the discussion. The warriors lowered their weapons. Elena felt the fear inside her begin to soften. Perhaps everything she had been told about the Apache people had been wrong. Dakota studied her injured feet. "You cannot walk much farther." "I'll manage." "No." Before she could protest, he called one of the younger riders. "Bring the spare horse." Within moments a gentle brown mare was led beside her. I don't know how to thank you." Dakota simply replied. "You may thank us by surviving." The group began riding through narrow canyons where towering cliffs blocked the burning sun. As evening approached, they reached a peaceful Apache camp hidden beside a flowing stream. Children laughed while chasing each other between the tents. Women prepared food over small fires. Elders sat beneath cottonwood trees telling stories to the younger generation. The scene was nothing like the violent images Elena had imagined. Several villagers paused to watch the stranger arrive. Some looked curious. Others remained cautious. Dakota spoke briefly with an elderly woman before turning back to Elena. You will stay here tonight. I don't want to cause trouble. You already have enough trouble. For the first time since the attack, Elena smiled. A small one. But genuine. The elderly woman approached carrying clean clothes and warm soup. You must eat, she said kindly. Elena accepted the bowl with grateful hands. The rich smell nearly brought tears to her eyes. She had never tasted food that felt so comforting. Across the camp, Dakota watched quietly. His closest friend approached. You believe she can be trusted? Dakota looked toward the evening sky. I believe fear has lied to both our peoples. His friend remained silent. Perhaps the chief was right. As darkness settled over the Apache village, stars filled the desert sky like countless lanterns. Wrapped in a warm blanket outside a small tent, Elena looked upward. Only that morning she had believed death was certain. Instead, strangers had offered her water, food, and safety. She closed her eyes with one thought echoing through her mind. Maybe this is not the end of my journey. Maybe it is the beginning of a life I never imagined. The first rays of dawn spread across the Apache camp, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Elena awoke to the distant sound of birds and the crackling of campfires. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. She was living among the Apache. The elderly woman who had cared for her the night before smiled warmly. You slept well. Elena nodded. Better than I have in days. Outside the tent, the camp was already alive. Men prepared their horses for the day's patrol, while women baked flatbread over hot stones. Children laughed as they raced through the village, their joy filling the cool morning air. It looked nothing like the stories she had heard growing up. She quietly stepped outside. Several villagers watched her with cautious curiosity. A few whispered among themselves, unsure whether an outsider truly belonged there. Elena lowered her eyes. She understood their hesitation. If their places had been reversed, perhaps she would have felt the same. Suddenly, Dakota approached on foot. You are stronger today. I feel much better. He noticed the bandage around her ankle had become loose. You should not walk too much. I don't want to be a burden. Dakota shook his head. A guest is not a burden. His calm voice carried quiet authority. Before Elena could reply, a young Apache boy came running toward them. Chief! A horse is missing. Dakota's expression became serious. Stay here. Within seconds, he was giving instructions to several warriors. Elena watched as they searched the edge of the camp. Finally, the missing horse was found grazing near the riverbank after slipping through a broken fence. The entire situation was handled peacefully. No shouting. No anger. Only teamwork. She couldn't help smiling. Later that afternoon, Elena offered to help prepare vegetables for dinner. The older women exchanged uncertain glances. One finally handed her a wooden knife. You know how? My mother taught me. Soon, Elena was chopping vegetables beside them. As the hours passed, the awkward silence slowly disappeared. One woman laughed when Elena accidentally sliced a carrot into uneven pieces. You cut like a child. Elena laughed too. I've been told worse. For the first time, genuine smiles appeared around the fire. Across the camp, Dakota quietly observed. His longtime friend, Nantan, stepped beside him. She learns quickly. Dakota nodded. She wants to belong. Nantan folded his arms. The council will ask questions. I know. Some will never accept an outsider. Dakota looked toward Elena. Acceptance is earned. That evening, a tribal council gathered around a large fire. The elders spoke in low voices while Dakota listened carefully. One elder frowned. She comes from the settlers. She has nowhere else to go, Dakota replied. That does not mean we should trust her. Another elder spoke more gently. She has shown kindness since arriving. The discussion continued long into the evening. Finally, the oldest elder raised his hand. The woman may remain, for now. Dakota inclined his head respectfully. I accept the council's decision. Although the answer wasn't permanent, it was enough. Elena had been given a chance. Later that night, Elena wandered toward the river carrying an empty water bucket. She stopped when she noticed Dakota sitting alone beneath a tall cottonwood tree. He stared silently into the flowing water. She hesitated. I don't want to interrupt. You are not. She carefully sat several feet away. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence felt peaceful rather than uncomfortable. Finally Elena asked softly. Do you always come here? When I need to think. She looked at the stars reflected on the water. It reminds me of home. Dakota remained quiet. After several moments he spoke. I once had a younger brother. Elena turned toward him. He was brave. A faint sadness crossed his face. He believed every stranger could become a friend. What happened? Dakota took a slow breath. A group of armed settlers entered our lands years ago. His voice remained steady, but pain lingered beneath every word. They promised peace. He paused. They broke that promise. Elena listened without interrupting. My brother trusted them. Dakota looked toward the dark horizon. He never returned. The silence between them grew heavy. I am so sorry, Elena whispered. Dakota nodded once. Loss teaches difficult lessons. Elena lowered her gaze. My father used to tell me every Apache was dangerous. Dakota gave a faint, almost sad smile. My people were told the same about yours. Both of them realized how fear had shaped generations on both sides. Neither spoke again for several minutes. Finally Elena broke the silence. Maybe the stories were wrong. Dakota looked at her. Perhaps. The peaceful moment was suddenly interrupted. A distant horn echoed through the valley. One of the watchmen shouted from the ridge. Riders! The camp instantly sprang into action. Warriors grabbed rifles and bows. Women hurried children toward safety. Dakota stood immediately. Stay inside the village. What is happening? We have visitors. His expression had become unreadable. Elena watched him mount his black stallion. Within moments, dozens of Apache warriors rode toward the edge of the valley. Dust rose into the evening sky. Standing near the river, Elena felt her heart race. She had finally begun to feel safe. Now she feared that safety was about to be tested. Far beyond the hills, a group of armed riders slowly approached the Apache lands. And their leader carried a reason for coming that would threaten the fragile peace Elena had just begun to find. The dust cloud grew larger with every passing minute. From the highest ridge overlooking the Apache camp, Dakota watched a group of nearly 20 armed riders approach the valley. Their horses moved in perfect formation, carrying rifles that glinted beneath the afternoon sun. Behind him, his warriors waited silently. What do you see, Chief? Nantan asked. Dakota narrowed his eyes. They're not soldiers. Bounty hunters? Perhaps. Without another word, he urged his black stallion forward, followed by several trusted warriors. They stopped on a rocky ridge overlooking the narrow entrance to the valley. The riders halted a short distance away. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a gray beard, raised one hand. We're not looking for a fight. Dakota remained expressionless. Then state your purpose. The man glanced toward the Apache camp. "We're searching for a settler woman." Dakota said nothing. "Her name is Elena Dawson." A tense silence settled over both groups. The stranger continued. "She disappeared after the wagon attack 3 days ago." Dakota finally spoke. "If she is alive, why do you seek her?" The rider hesitated before answering. "Her uncle has offered a reward for anyone who brings her home." Dakota studied the man's face carefully. Years of experience had taught him to recognize lies. Something about the stranger's eyes felt wrong. "If your intentions are honest," Dakota said calmly, "return tomorrow with the local sheriff." The leader frowned. "We don't need permission." "You do if you wish to cross Apache land." The two men stared at one another. Finally, the riders turned their horses around. "We'll be back." Dakota watched until the last rider disappeared beyond the hills. Only then did he turn back toward camp. Elena had been waiting anxiously near the council fire. When Dakota returned, she immediately recognized the concern in his eyes. "Who were they?" "They were looking for you." Her face paled. "My uncle?" "So they claimed." She lowered her head. "He wouldn't pay strangers to rescue me." "You are certain?" "Yes." Dakota nodded slowly. "Then someone is lying." That evening, the council gathered once again. Several elders believed Elena should leave before more outsiders arrived. "If those men return with more guns," one elder warned, "our children will be in danger." Others disagreed. "She came to us seeking nothing. She has shown respect. She deserves protection." The debate lasted for hours. Finally, Dakota stood. "I gave this woman my word that she would be safe here." Every conversation stopped. "As long as she remains under my protection, no one will take her by force." No elder challenged him. The decision had been made. The next morning, Elena insisted on helping around the village. She carried water from the river, gathered firewood and helped prepare meals. Several children followed her everywhere she went. One little girl handed Elena a bundle of colorful wildflowers. "For you." Elena smiled warmly. "They're beautiful." The child grinned. "My grandmother says flowers help people smile." Nearby, Dakota watched quietly. Nantan laughed. "I think the children have already accepted her." Dakota allowed himself a faint smile. They see hearts more clearly than adults. Later that afternoon, a frightened cry echoed through the camp. "Horse!" One of the younger boys had wandered too close to a nervous stallion. The frightened animal reared onto its hind legs. The child froze. People shouted. Before anyone could react, Elena sprinted forward. She grabbed the boy and rolled with him across the ground just as the horse charged past. Dust exploded around them. The stallion raced toward the open desert. For a heartbeat, the entire camp fell silent. Then the boy burst into tears. "I'm sorry." Elena hugged him tightly. "You're safe." Dakota hurried over. "Are you injured?" She winced slightly, revealing a scrape along her arm. "I'm fine." The boy's mother embraced her son before turning to Elena. "You saved his life." Other villagers slowly gathered around. Their cautious expressions had disappeared. One elder stepped forward. "You acted without thinking of yourself." Elena looked embarrassed. "Anyone would have done the same." The elder smiled gently. "Not everyone." That evening, the atmosphere in the camp felt different. People greeted Elena warmly. Children waved as she walked past. Even the elders who had doubted her now nodded respectfully. For the first time since arriving, she no longer felt like an outsider. As darkness settled across the valley, Dakota found Elena standing beside the river. "You were brave today." She looked at the flowing water. I wasn't brave. You ran toward danger. I saw a frightened child. Dakota smiled slightly. My brother would have done the same. Elena looked at him. I wish I could have met him. So do I. For several quiet moments, neither spoke. The desert wind carried the scent of pine and sage through the valley. It felt peaceful. Almost too peaceful. High above the camp, hidden among the rocks, a lone figure watched through a spyglass. It was the bearded rider from the day before. He lowered the glass and smiled coldly. So. The girl is alive. He turned toward the men waiting with him. We return at sunrise. This time, he said, loading his rifle, we're taking her with us. Far below, the Apache village slept peacefully, unaware that the greatest test of their courage was only hours away. The first light of dawn had barely touched the mountaintops when an urgent cry echoed across the Apache camp. Riders! Within seconds, the peaceful village burst into motion. Warriors grabbed their bows and rifles. Mothers hurried children and elders toward the caves hidden in the cliffs. Horses stamped nervously as the sound of galloping hooves grew louder. Dakota stepped outside his lodge, already fastening his rifle across his shoulder. Nantan rode up beside him. They've returned. How many? More than yesterday. Dakota climbed onto his black stallion and rode toward the entrance of the valley. Nearly 30 armed riders approached through the narrow pass, led by the same gray-bearded man. Dakota raised one hand, signaling his warriors to hold their positions. The riders stopped several yards away. The leader called out, "We're taking the woman back today." Dakota's voice remained calm. She chooses where she belongs. The man laughed harshly. A savage tribe doesn't make that decision. Dakota's eyes hardened. Neither do you. The rider's smile vanished. Then we'll take her ourselves. He spurred his horse forward. The first arrow landed in the ground directly before him. His horse reared, forcing him to stop. Dakota had fired a warning, not an attack. You have one chance to leave peacefully. Instead, one of the strangers fired his rifle. The bullet struck a rock beside the Apache warriors. Silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then the valley erupted. Arrows flew from the rocky cliffs while warriors on horseback swept across the open ground with remarkable speed. The attackers fired wildly, but the narrow valley worked against them. Dakota rode through the chaos with calm precision, shouting orders rather than charging recklessly. Protect the children. Hold the eastern ridge. Do not pursue them into the open. His warriors obeyed instantly. Back in the village, Elena helped the elderly and frightened children move into a sheltered cave. One little girl clung tightly to her hand. Will the chief be all right? Elena forced a reassuring smile. He'll come back. Although she hoped her words were true, fear tightened her chest. Outside, the sounds of battle echoed across the valley. Near the western ridge, Nantan noticed two riders breaking away from the main fight. They're heading toward the village. Dakota turned immediately. Without hesitation, he raced after them. The two men slipped past the outer guards and reached the edge of the camp. One jumped from his horse and rushed toward Elena. There she is. Elena stepped backward, shielding the children behind her. I'm not going with you. You don't have a choice. The man reached for her arm. Before he could touch her, Dakota's voice thundered across the camp. Stop. Everyone froze. Dakota rode between Elena and the stranger. His expression remained calm, but his eyes carried unmistakable determination. I warned you. The outlaw raised his rifle. Dakota moved first. With one swift motion, he knocked the weapon aside using his horse's shoulder. The rifle fell into the dust, and the man stumbled backwards. Seeing their plan fail, the remaining riders began retreating toward the valley entrance. Their leader shouted angrily, "Fall back!" One by one, the attackers turned and fled. The Apache warriors did not chase them beyond their lands. Dakota had taught them that defending home was more important than revenge. As silence slowly returned, the villagers emerged from their shelters. Children ran to their parents. Warriors checked on one another, treating minor injuries. Fortunately, no one had been seriously hurt. Elena looked around at the people who had risked everything to protect her. Tears filled her eyes. "I never wanted this to happen." Dakota shook his head. "This was never your fault." She looked down. "If I leave, they'll stop coming." Several villagers overheard her. The elderly woman who had first welcomed Elena stepped forward. "You are part of this village now." Others nodded in agreement. "You stood with us. We stand with you." Elena struggled to hold back her tears. For the first time in many years, she truly felt she belonged somewhere. That evening, the council gathered around the fire once more. An elder spoke thoughtfully. "Today's attack has shown us something important." Another nodded. "Our strength comes from standing together." Dakota looked around the circle. "The men who attacked us were driven by greed." He then turned toward Elena. "You stayed when you could have run." She answered quietly. "I couldn't leave people who had shown me kindness." The council exchanged approving glances. The oldest elder rose slowly to his feet. "Then let it be known." He smiled warmly. "Elena is welcome among us for as long as she wishes." The villagers responded with smiles and quiet applause. Elena could barely believe what she was hearing. Looking across the fire, her eyes met Dakota's. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Mutual trust had replaced fear. Yet far beyond the Apache lands, the defeated riders regrouped around a lonely campfire. The gray-bearded leader slammed his fist against a wagon wheel. "We underestimated them." Another outlaw asked. "What now?" The leader's expression darkened. "If we can't force her out, we'll lure them into a trap." The flames crackled as the men began planning a far more dangerous scheme, one that threatened not only Elena and Dakota, but the future of the entire valley. The valley had finally grown quiet again. For 3 peaceful days, no strangers appeared near the Apache lands. Children laughed beside the river, hunters returned with fresh game, and the villagers slowly began believing that the danger had passed. But Dakota wasn't convinced. Standing on a rocky cliff overlooking the valley, he scanned the distant hills through the morning mist. Nantan rode beside him. "You still think they'll return?" Dakota nodded. Men driven by greed rarely give up. Before Nantan could answer, a young scout galloped toward them. "Chief!" Dakota turned. "What is it?" "I found wagon tracks in the northern pass." "How many?" "5 wagons, and many horses." Dakota frowned. "They're moving closer." Later that afternoon, Elena was helping the women collect herbs near the river when Dakota arrived. "We're returning to the village." She immediately noticed the concern in his face. "Something has happened?" "Our scouts found strangers." "Those men again?" "I believe so." The women quietly gathered their baskets before everyone returned to camp. That evening, the council met once more. One elder spoke first. "If they attack again, many more lives could be lost." Another nodded. "They may have hired more men." Dakota spread a rough map of the valley across a flat stone. "If they enter through the northern pass, they will reach this narrow canyon." He pointed to a steep section surrounded by towering cliffs. "There, their horses cannot move freely." The warriors understood immediately. Rather than meeting the attackers in open ground, they would defend the narrow entrance where numbers mattered less. Before sunrise the following morning, Apache scouts took positions along the cliffs. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Then, just after midday, a frightened horse burst into the valley without a rider. Its saddle was torn. An arrow was lodged in its side. Nantan examined it carefully. "This horse belongs to one of our scouts." Takota's expression hardened. "It's a trap." At that very moment another scout appeared, badly exhausted. "Chief, they captured White Hawk." Several warriors stepped forward in anger. "They're using him as bait." Takota remained calm despite the tension. "We do not abandon our own." He quickly chose a small rescue party. Nantan. 2 experienced trackers. And himself. Elena stepped forward. "Please, be careful." Takota looked at her. "I intend to return." The rescue party rode silently into the mountains. Hours later they found the abandoned camp. There were dying campfires. Empty food tins. Broken wagon wheels. Everything suggested the outlaws had left in a hurry. Too quickly. Takota dismounted and studied the ground. "There are too few footprints." Nantan looked confused. "They wanted us to find this place." Takota's eyes lifted toward the cliffs. "Take cover." Gunshots exploded from above. Bullets struck rocks around them. Dust filled the narrow canyon. The outlaws had been waiting. Takota and his warriors quickly moved behind large boulders. The gray-bearded outlaw laughed from the ridge. "I knew you'd come." He had nearly 20 armed men hidden among the rocks. Takota realized they were badly outnumbered. But panic never reached his face. Instead, he quietly studied the cliffs. Large loose boulders rested high above the attackers. He whispered to Nantan. "See those rocks?" Nantan smiled. "I do." Using the cover of rifle fire, 2 Apache warriors climbed the opposite slope unnoticed. Moments later, a tremendous rumble echoed through the canyon. Massive rocks crashed down the hillside. The startled outlaws scattered in every direction. Dust swallowed the narrow pass. Takota seized the opportunity. "Now!" The Apache warriors rushed forward. They freed White Hawk, who had been tied behind a fallen tree, and quickly retreated before the dust settled. Their goal was never revenge. It was rescue. By sunset, the rescue party returned safely to the village. The entire camp gathered to welcome them. Children cheered. Families embraced the returning warriors. White Hawk thanked Takota. "I thought they would leave me there." Takota placed a hand on his shoulder. "No Apache is left behind." That evening, Elena found Takota sitting beside the river. She quietly sat beside him. "You could have been killed today. So could many others." She looked into the flowing water. "You always think about everyone else first." Takota smiled faintly. "A chief who thinks only of himself soon has no people to lead." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "You've changed the way I see the world." He turned toward her. "You've changed mine as well." Neither said anything more. The silence between them carried a quiet understanding that words could not express. Meanwhile, miles away, the defeated outlaws gathered around another campfire. The gray-bearded leader stared angrily into the flames. "They escaped again." One of his men asked nervously. "What do we do now?" The outlaw slowly stood. "If we cannot defeat the Apache with force, we'll destroy what they value most." He unrolled a map of the valley. His finger stopped at the river that supplied water to the entire village. The men around the fire exchanged uneasy glances. Their leader smiled coldly. "Tomorrow, the real war begins." The morning sun rose over the valley, but an uneasy silence lingered in the Apache camp. Dakota stood beside the river, studying the clear water flowing through the valley. His scouts had reported strange movements during the night. The outlaws were still nearby, and he knew they were planning one final attack. Nantan approached. Our scouts found fresh tracks near the eastern ridge. Dakota nodded. They're moving toward the river. If they block the water, the entire village will suffer. Without wasting another moment, Dakota gathered his warriors. Today we protect our home. Back in the village, Elena helped the women fill every available water barrel. The elderly woman who had welcomed her smiled. You've become one of us. Elena looked around the village. Only a few weeks earlier, these people had been strangers. Now they felt like family. A young girl ran toward her carrying the same bundle of wildflowers she had once given Elena. These are for good luck. Elena hugged her gently. Thank you. Near the river, the outlaws began piling fallen trees across the narrow channel, hoping to stop the flow of water into the valley. The gray-bearded leader laughed. They'll surrender soon enough. Before they could finish, a familiar voice echoed across the rocks. Leave our land. Dakota and his warriors emerged from both sides of the canyon. The outlaws quickly reached for their rifles. But this time, they found themselves surrounded. The Apache warriors had quietly taken the high ground during the night. The outlaw leader looked around and realized there was no escape. You planned this. Dakota answered calmly. I learned from your last trap. The outlaw raised his rifle. Before he could fire, Nantan knocked the weapon from his hands. The remaining outlaws saw their leader captured and slowly lowered their weapons. The fight ended almost as quickly as it had begun. Dakota ordered his warriors to tie the prisoners' hands. No unnecessary violence, he said. They will answer for what they have done. Several days later, the local sheriff arrived with deputies after hearing reports of the attacks. The captured outlaws were taken away to face justice. Before leaving, the sheriff removed his hat. I owe your people an apology. Dakota looked at him. Peace begins with honesty. The sheriff nodded. I'll remember that. As the wagons disappeared into the distance, the valley finally felt peaceful again. That evening, the Apache village celebrated. Music echoed beneath the stars. Children danced around the great fire while families shared food and stories. Laughter filled the air. Elena watched the celebration with a smile. Not long ago she had believed she would never have another home. Now she stood surrounded by people who cared for her. Dakota walked over. The valley is quiet again. She nodded. Thanks to you. He smiled. Thanks to all of us. Later, the village elders gathered around the fire. The oldest elder stood and addressed everyone. Our people have faced hardship. He looked toward Elena. But we have also found new friends. The villagers applauded warmly. The elder turned to Elena. When you first arrived, many of us were uncertain. He smiled kindly. Today, you have our respect. Elena felt tears fill her eyes. I don't know how to thank all of you. You already have, the elder replied. You chose kindness when fear would have been easier. As the celebration continued, Dakota and Elena walked to the river where they had shared so many quiet conversations. The moon reflected on the water. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Dakota broke the silence. When I first found you in the desert, I believed I was simply saving a stranger. Elena smiled softly. And now? He looked toward the peaceful village. Now I know you helped save something inside me. Elena reached for his hand. So we rescued each other. Dakota nodded. Yes. Together they watched the river flow beneath the moonlight. The fears that had once divided their worlds had given way to trust, friendship, and hope. The valley was no longer just a place where they had met. It had become the home they had built together. And as the stars filled the night sky, the people of the village celebrated not only the end of a long struggle, but the beginning of a brighter future, where courage, compassion, and understanding were stronger than fear. The end.